Hello everybody, Ryan MC here, and guess what guys? I think I am a book YouTuber, at least for a little while. I had a lot of fun making the last video, so I decided that I'm just gonna keep doing some book stuff for now. I decided that I'm gonna try to stop labeling myself as like some sort of YouTuber just to one specific genre, because, I don't know, I just do whatever the hell I want, and right now I just feel like talking about some books and stuff. Hope you guys are okay with that. If not, then I'm sorry, I guess. I don't know. But whatever. So today I will be talking about my top 5 favorite fantasy authors. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, I believe that fantasy is the greatest genre in all of literature. There's just so many magical and amazing stories that you can tell through the lens of fantasy. I think it's just amazing. And today I just wanted to count down my top 5 favorite authors. Now, there are a few disclaimers that I wanted to put out before I start this video, so just to make things a little bit more clear. So number 1 is that this of course is my personal opinion. It is not the definitive list, it is not objective, it is completely 100% subjective, and so you guys have the right to agree or disagree with me however you so choose, but yeah, this is not the definitive objective ranking of the top 5 fantasy authors. Number 2 is that this is obviously just a list of fantasy authors that I have personally read. I obviously have not been able to read every single fantasy author, every single fantasy book that is out there. I wish that I could, but there just is not that much time in the day. So there will probably be a few authors on here that you guys may be like, hey, this guy should have been on the list or whatever. So just to get out of the way, I have not read anything by Robert Jordan. I know some people think, and it's actually quite a popular opinion, that he is one of the best, if not the best fantasy author out there, and I want to get into the Wheel of Time eventually, but I am just not ready for that kind of commitment in my life. A couple other authors that I haven't read, like Robin Hobb and Brent Weeks, those people will just not be on this list either, because obviously I have not read them. And the third and final disclaimer is that this list is not static. I am constantly reading and discovering new authors for myself that maybe would be on this list in the future, and yeah, I continue updating my top 5 favorite fantasy authors, so this list may change in the future. This is just my current opinion of who I believe is the greatest fantasy authors. So, with that out of the way, let's get on to the list. Alright, so I kinda cheated here. So, saying this video is a top 5 is a little bit of a white lie. I decided to include 2 honorable mentions, but saying that this video is a top 5 rather than a top 7 just sounds a lot better. So, I will be including 2 honorable mentions. Alright, so the first honorable mention that I will be including is J.K. Rowling, obviously most famous for writing the Harry Potter series. Now, the reason that I am not including J.K. Rowling on this list is because while I do absolutely love the Harry Potter series, they're completely magical, the characters in them are great, and I do really love the Harry Potter series. My personal opinion of J.K. Rowling as a person has definitely soured over the past couple of years with all of her weird political takes and her need to just kind of get in on a lot of political issues and things like that. My opinion has soured over time, but that nonetheless, that does sour my opinion of her as a person, but it does not sour my opinion of her as an author. The Harry Potter books are absolutely fantastic. I recommend them to basically anybody. Like a lot of you, I read them when I was a little kid, and I absolutely loved them. I decided to pick them up a couple of years ago and reread them as an adult, and I found them personally even better, because there's a lot of things that you just don't pick up on as a kid, and maybe you need to go through some certain experiences in life and things to truly appreciate what J.K. Rowling has to offer, and I would love to go and reread them again when I am older. Personally, these books can appeal to people of any age. My grandma, who is one of the biggest readers that I know, picked these books up in her 60s, and to this day says that this is the greatest book series that she's ever read. So, yeah, I do love J.K. Rowling as an author, but personally, I just found more authors that I do prefer. And my next honorable mention that I just felt that I could not make this list without including, I do truly love. He was battling back and forth between some of the authors that are further up on this list, and that is George R.R. Martin. Best known for, of course, the Song of Ice and Fire series, the Game of Thrones series, and the books that come along with that, as well as some independent novels that take place in a more science fiction world. Now, George Martin is one of those authors that I believe has redefined the genre of fantasy. His world building is absolutely incredible, almost paralleling people like Tolkien, and the way he's able to write characters and get you invested into them, it definitely grips you and keeps you entertained throughout the entirety of his stories. And that's an amazing thing to do, considering that there are 5 books and almost all of them are over 1,000 pages. So that is a very difficult thing to do. The way he is able to keep you invested with the characters, make you love these characters, and then just simultaneously rip your heart out, it's just amazing. It's unparalleled by any author. The saying that goes along with reading these Song of Ice and Fire books is don't get attached to any characters because they're more than likely going to die. But every time it happens, it shouldn't be a surprise, but it is. And that's just amazing that George Martin is able to do that. Now, why I haven't included George R.R. Martin in this list is because I try not to let other things influence my opinion of the books, but I just gotta look at the TV show just because of how influential the TV show Game of Thrones has been, and it has soured my opinion a little bit just because the books are amazing, the show was so great, but then it just ended on such a low note. It was not a great ending, and it worries me beyond belief that the book series will end in a similar way. So I am very worried about that, and also it has been almost 10 years since the last book came out. I'm worried that it never will get finished. So yeah, George R.R. Martin, number 6. Alright, so starting with the actual top 5 list, I'm going to be including at number 5 an author that, I kid you not, I discovered 3 days ago, and that is Jim Butcher, most famous for the Dresden Files series of books. Now, the reason that Jim Butcher is not higher on this list is I have only read the first book, and I only did discover it 3 days ago, like I said. But oh my gosh, I have never, I believe, torn through a book as quickly as I did Stormfront, the first book of the Dresden Files. It is so great. Basically, the book is around 360 pages, and to be able to read it in 3 days is just astonishing. That is something that I don't believe I have ever done before, and it just makes me so excited to read the remainder of the Dresden Files. The way that Jim Butcher is able to write, I believe personally he is my favorite author that I have ever read in terms of how he's able to write dialogue. His dialogue is just incredibly witty, the characters are very well written, the world is built very nicely, and he doesn't over-explain things, which is definitely a trope that a lot of fantasy authors fall into. There are magical things in this world, and sometimes you may be like, I don't know what that means, and he'll give you like a 1 paragraph or couple sentence explanation of what that means, and I truly appreciate that. It doesn't treat you like a child. It's like, this is what it is. You don't need to know every single thing about it. Just move on with the story, and that just helps you tear through the book. It just goes at such an entertaining pace, and yeah, Jim Butcher, very excited to have him on my list at number 5. Alright, number 4. 4. Number 4, I have an author that I only got into a couple of months ago, similar to Jim Butcher, even though I have read more books by this specific author, and that is Neil Gaiman, most famous for books like American Gods, Good Omens, those sort of things. Neil Gaiman is an author that I have tried to pick up a few times when I was younger, but finally I just decided a few months ago to pick up American Gods, and this book completely changed my opinion on him. The way he's able to write dialogue is very witty. He's probably the funniest fantasy author that I have ever read, and also he's able to include gods and magic in the world without shoving it down your face. It just feels like you're living in a world where this has always been the case and you are just now learning about it. So I very much enjoy Neil Gaiman. I believe that he may not stay on this list for long if I do continue to read more fantasy authors, but I am truly enjoying Neil Gaiman. I decided to pick up a couple more of his books that I had lying around that I had tried to get into before but never really could, and I'm very much enjoying them as well. Neil Gaiman is able to write very magical worlds, even though the world is our world, but it is just changed in a way that makes it seem like a whole new world, and you're just like discovering things for the first time in the world. It's like walking in the woods and discovering an old house or something that you've never seen before. So Neil Gaiman, number 4. Alright, at number 3, we are going to have probably my most controversial pick. They're going to be like, why is this guy only at number 3? And I will say that if this was a list of the top 5 best fantasy authors on an objective level, this guy should be number 1, and that, of course, is J.R.R. Tolkien, most famous for The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So, yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien only at number 3. The way he is able to build worlds is absolutely unparalleled by anybody. You can truly tell that the world that he has created in Middle-earth is a fully fleshed out world with different races that are fully realized, like elves, orcs, dwarves, humans even, hobbits, and things like that. He is the father of the modern fantasy genre. Everybody who has come after Tolkien is inspired by him in some way, and that is a statement that I am willing to stand by, because he is just regardless so influential. Even somebody who is a fantasy writer and has never read Tolkien is inspired by Tolkien just because his work is so influential, and that is just absolutely astounding that he is able to do so in such a fantastic way. Truly, whenever you are reading Tolkien, you have to, it's not like you are reading a book, you have to dive into Tolkien's mind, and you have to fully realize that this is the world you are living in. The world that is Middle-earth is just as fleshed out and realized as our real world. You know, you read the Silmarillion and the Lost Tales and things like that, you hear the history of Middle-earth. The Silmarillion is essentially the Bible. You hear the creation of Middle-earth, the gods, quote-unquote, and that is just fantastic. There is no other author that I can think of that has put so much effort into the Lord of the Rings, or into his books, I should say. And yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien, he even created languages for his characters just to fully flesh out the world. And when he passed away, his son Christopher Tolkien picked up the mantle and published a lot of his unfinished works. So it just fully realizes the world of Middle-earth that J.R.R. Tolkien was able to create. Now you may be wondering, I have such high praises for J.R.R. Tolkien, why is he only at number 3? And that is just for one simple thing, and that's his writing style. His writing style is very much outdated. While you are able to get into it, you have to be an advanced reader to fully grasp it, and you have to reread it, and you have to analyze it to completely get everything that J.R.R. Tolkien was trying to go for. Especially pretty much any of his books, maybe aside from The Hobbit, because The Hobbit is essentially a kid's book, but even that can be difficult at times. The way he writes, as I stated in kind of my positives for J.R.R. Tolkien, is that he is so descriptive because he wants you to feel like you are in the world of Middle-earth. But that can be tedious at times. You know, he can go on for pages describing somebody's armor, what they look like, what a rock looks like, what a river looks like. It can get very tedious at times. And Basically, that is my main criticism. And sometimes things are being described so heavily that something's going on in the background and you don't even realize that it happened. I've started reading The Lord of the Rings and finished it for the first time when I was in middle school, and I was definitely, I think, too young to be reading The Lord of the Rings just because I was not getting everything that was being thrown at me. I remember reading The Two Towers, and we were getting to the part where the Battle of Helm's Deep takes place, and I was expecting it to be like in the movies, just like so grand, so epic, such a awesome battle essentially, and I was just getting so hyped for it, and then I read it and didn't even realize that it had started yet. I had to turn back the book and be like, wait, that was the Battle of Helm's Deep? It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I definitely recommend picking it up when you are older. There's still plenty of enjoyment to have when you are a little kid, but I try to reread The Lord of the Rings once every couple of years, just because every single time I pick it up, I'm picking up on new themes and new things that I just didn't realize the times before. And they're so in-depth and detailed that it's pretty much impossible to remember everything with only one read-through, so you gotta go back and do it some more. And at number 2 on this list, we have Brandon Sanderson, most famous for Mistborn, Elantris, and the Stormlight Archive. And I've only read the Stormlight Archive. In fact, I haven't even read the 3rd book yet. But just from the first 2 books, I can tell that Brandon Sanderson is and will be one of my favorite authors of all time. And that is just astonishing that in 2 books he can make me feel that way. Brandon Sanderson is the modern day J.R.R. Tolkien, and that is a statement that I will be willing to die for. Not actually die for, but I will be willing to stand by it, because the way that Brandon Sanderson writes is very reminiscent of J.R.R. Tolkien. He is very descriptive. Obviously, this book is over 1,200 pages, and as I said before in my previous video, this is my favorite book of all time. I love the 2nd book, Words of Radiance, as well, and I'm very excited to read the 3rd book, but Brandon Sanderson is just able to craft a world similar to Tolkien, where it's like fully realized, and he goes even more in depth in certain aspects with like the magic system. The magic system is incredible in The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive as a whole. You can fully realize how things are happening, and that is just astonishing. The characters he writes are just amazing as well. One of my favorite things that Brandon Sanderson does, I think probably my favorite thing that he does, is make his characters human. And sometimes when you're reading like Tolkien or some of the more classic fantasy authors, you feel like these characters are not human. They don't seem very realized. But with Brandon Sanderson, you can put yourself in their shoes. You hear their struggles. One of the biggest things that I love about Brandon Sanderson is the way he writes Kaladin in this book. Kaladin is personally my favorite character in this book, and the reason that I love him so much is because he is able to write in such a way that makes you feel for him and makes you relate to him in so many different ways, especially with his struggles with mental health issues, which is something that I don't think really any fantasy author has been able to touch upon in a way that is so graceful as Brandon Sanderson. You can tell that Kaladin is struggling with depression, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, and his rise from coming up from that is just so amazing, and I loved reading every second of him. The other characters are great as well, again, very fully realized, and yeah, the world that Brandon Sanderson has created, you can tell it's fully fleshed out, and it is just amazing that he's able to craft such a world, and I do believe that he will go down in history as one of, if not the greatest fantasy authors of all time, if he's not considered so already. Alright, the moment you have all been waiting for, my number 1 personal favorite fantasy author of all time, and that is Terry Goodkind. I'm just kidding. Terry Goodkind is probably the worst fantasy author ever. It's Patrick Rothfuss. Now, that may be a little bit controversial to say. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I have my own personal gripes with it, but none of them have to do with the way that Patrick Rothfuss writes. Now, I don't believe that he has much outside of the Kingkiller Chronicles in terms of published or well-known works, but this book series is absolutely entertaining from start to finish. He writes in a first-person perspective, which typically I'm not a huge fan of in fantasy, but the way that Patrick Rothfuss is able to do it, it just makes the world so much better, in the sense that you are able to relate to Kvothe, the main character in this story, in ways that you shouldn't be able to. Kvothe is an incredibly powerful wizard, and I feel like he's me when I'm reading this book, and I shouldn't feel that way. He is a powerful wizard who goes on magical adventures and just has all these cool things happen to him, but I am able to relate to him in such a way that it just feels like I am in this world, and that is something that no author has been able to accomplish in a way so seamlessly as Patrick Rothfuss, in my opinion. His dialogue between characters is incredibly witty, and the way he writes mysteries are incredibly satisfying as well. You are kept guessing as to who's the culprit or what's going to happen until the end. And the way he writes, it's just so entertaining, and you want to know what happens next. And god damn it, Patrick Rothfuss, it has been 2011 since the last book came out. Similar position to George R.R. Martin. And I'm just so anticipating the third book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. Now, I know that Patrick wanted it to be a trilogy, and I think one of the problems that has come up with him in writing the book is having so much to tell, so many loose ends to tie up in the end, that I believe he's struggling to make it into one final book. So if it ends up becoming like 2 more books, that would be even better, but I am praying beyond all belief that the ending is satisfying, because the whole series has been satisfying in my opinion. Now, I know there are a lot of people that have gripes with the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I have quite a few of my own, but like I said before, none of them have to do with the way that Patrick Rothfuss writes. My camera went out of focus, and yeah, Patrick Rothfuss is just able to put you in this world. And oh yeah, I forgot to even mention, the magic system in this book is just so incredible. The way it has to do with science and chemistry, and not just some magical sorcery that comes from the world that you are just instantly connected to. No, you have to learn, and you have to devise ways to do different spells and things like that. And it is just astonishing. And please, Patrick, finish the third book. I am so desperate to see what happens next. And there you have it. That is my top 5, well, I guess technically top 7 favorite fantasy authors list. And yeah, I know that some of my picks might be controversial, but like I said, this is my list. I have not read every single fantasy author, and this is subject to change. Maybe if you guys are interested, in a year or 2, I will update this list as I read more. Like, 2 of the authors that are on this list are only on this list because of books that I've read within the past couple of months. So that just goes to show how much this is able to be shifted. So yeah, let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of my choices. Tell me what your favorite fantasy authors are. And yeah, I guess I'm gonna be a book YouTuber for a little while. I'm having so much fun with it, and there's just so much stuff that I want to talk about in the world of books. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.